Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now it's National Poetry Day, but don't expect any wicked wordplay to arrest the relentless decline in our audience figures. After all, Liz and Michael are no slick orators. Why do you think they started on the front benches and ended up on this sofa? And after 3 weeks of party conferences, I've had my fill of snollygosters, honeyfugglers, hornswogglers, and prestidigitation. If you want to know what any of that means, look up the Webster Dictionary. Anyway, that's why we're putting the power of a speech in this week's Spotlight.
Talk to me.
There has never been a more exciting time to be a Conservative.
Really? Commentators labelled speeches at this week's Tory conference boring.
67 plus 147 equals 214.
And at times repetitive.
Here is a justice system,
a Northern Ireland,
an environment
it's a country
that works for everyone.
But does rousing rhetoric matter to a Prime Minister who thinks politics is more about substance than style?
It's about doing something, not being someone.
On the other side of the pond, Donald Trump's polling numbers have dipped after a poor run of public appearances. Cue Nigel Farage, who's been giving him some tips on communication ahead of this weekend's presidential debate.
What you've got to do, Donald, is talk to people sitting at home in their living rooms. Don't get involved in a cat fight with Hillary.
Rodrigo Duterte, controversial new leader of the Philippines, appeared to compare his war on drugs to the Holocaust.
Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now, there is 3 million, there's a 3 million drug addicts. I'd be happy to slaughter them.
He claimed he was misinterpreted. But is he an example of someone who wields words irresponsibly?
You trust them with no one's detective skills.
Spoken word artist George the poet knows all about the power of speech. So how important is language when it comes to causing a stir?
Talk to me.
And George is with us now. George, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
Is the spoken word, is it still the most persuasive form of communication?
I think it is, because it's the crux of human communication. Anything else is an offshoot or an adaptation. And you can see the central role that it will forever play in politics, at least.
And if you want to get your message across, it's not enough just to have a good message. You've got to know how to communicate that message.
I mean, that's been the trend of politics for a while now. Unfortunately, it's not just about being right, it's about being persuasive, convincing, popular to an extent.
People can tell as well, can't they?
I mean, they can. Like people naturally respond to someone who naturally takes to the stage. And unfortunately, then you get the kind of style over substance element. Even when people, the person talking is perfectly capable of making a sound argument, it's just so easy to win people over if you can do it with charisma.
Do you change the way you communicate depending on who you're speaking to?
Oh, 100%. I've done that since I was a child. I'm from an inner city community. I went to a grammar school and then I went to Cambridge, and I was always like flitting between different kinds of communities and people. So that it became a survival technique.
To do that and to change.
Yeah.
Michael, this isn't an age of great rhetoric, is it? I mean, I say that having been at both party conferences, Labour and Tory. They're not great speakers.
I think it's quite a confused picture, because I think someone like Obama became president on the back of rhetoric. Oh. I think Trump has got to where he's got to by, hitting certain buttons amongst a certain part of the American public. On the other hand, David Cameron, who was a better orator than Theresa May, was less successful in 6 years in telling people what he was about than Theresa May has been in the last 6 weeks. I mean, people now have a bigger understanding of what Theresa May is about than they ever had about what David Cameron is about, despite her poorer rhetoric.
You're nodding?
Yeah, I thought she answered that question, why do you want to be Prime Minister? I remember when Cameron was asked and he said, because I'd be rather good at it. She really answered it differently. But I think you're right, Andrew. the speeches that I remember, I mean, mostly actually are by Americans, whether it's Martin Luther King or my favourite JFK's Ich bin ein Berliner. It's something that we don't, you know, remembering phrases from a political speech, it's very difficult these days.
But there are great political speeches, maybe just not so many around at the moment.
There have been, and I suppose it comes from, like I'll always revert to, conviction. When people feel there is something to be said, something to be stood for, memorable sentiment comes out of that. But if that doesn't exist, it's very hard to fake.
Politicians, though, now need two forms of communication. You were saying that you change, because the skills that may make a politician good in a studio like this, talking to people like me, may not be the same sort of skills that made JFK the great orator, or Churchill. Also, Churchill may have been rather bad in a studio like this. The two skills are not the same, are they?
Oh, not at all. And that all comes down to register. It's quite a buzzword in education, I think. Multimodal speech, just basically being able to switch it up, which is often said about a lot of career politicians that haven't actually had experience in other areas, dealing with other communities. There's a gap there, and you're not going to make that connection otherwise.
The strongest speech in this party conference season was Tom Watson's. That was, of all the party, that was the Labour Party conference. That was clear. There were very little outstanding ones at the Conservative conference at all. What are you up to?
So my whole thing is trying to create a community out of my audience. I'm about to start my new tour, the Search Party tour. Right. And in that, all of my poems are topical. So while I've got you in the space and we're feeling something about a pressing issue, let's do something about it. So I built like an advocacy model.
Oh, I thought you were meaning right now.
You are good. Well, no,
here we are right now.
Because, let me just lead up to, because that's your lot for tonight, but not for us. Because we're off to Annabelle's for a bucket of Blue Nun. We were going to drop in at Lulu's, where it's whose turn is it to be UKIP leader tonight. But the answer's always the same, Nigel Farage. And Michael and I were worried we couldn't vouch for Liz's safety, given the party's current predilection for altercations.
I'm safe with these on.
Well, she can look after herself. We'll leave you, though, with George the Poet, with an extract from his song Search Party, which is exactly what he's still doing. Nighty-night, don't let UKIP's fisticuffs bite.
Listen, if you're in any way interested in the future of the world you've invested in, the destiny of the place you now reside, after all the conventional powers died, please consider walking down to our side. We can talk about the widening north and south divide and, of course, the housing prices, which are now in crisis. We hold discussions on property value and how it rises. And even when we don't have the answers, we're happy to direct you to where all the sound advice is. Our policies might not always sound the nicest, but you finally found a guy that's down to fight this. So as long as you want to be courageous, I promise you, we're going to see some changes.
Good stuff, George.
Thank you.
I've been getting